Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Just going to wait for the Vice Commodore to take his seats anytime. Okay, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the second race briefing. Welcome to the CYCA on behalf of the members, the board. It's great to see you here racing in this 74th edition of the Rolex Sydney Hobart Yacht Race. Once again, I recognise and thank our long-standing sponsor, Rolex. They really are the best possible supporter of ocean racing, and we're very fortunate to have them. I also thank you as yacht owners, navigators and crews for the effort you've gone to over the last few months just to get your boats to this point. We're very, very grateful that you take part in this race and make it the great spectacle that it is. I also need to thank our race committee, our sailing office and our army of volunteers who come together, and no doubt you've been working with them over the past few days to get you off safely. I thank in particular the JBW and John Winning, who once again has donated the radio relay vessel, which you'll come to know very much over the next few days and is a very important part of our race. We're very grateful for that. And then finally, the volunteers in Hobart, and we're joined today by Tracy Matthews, the Commodore of the RYCT. The welcome for those who've not been there before is fantastic, it's genuine, and the 4 or 5 days that you get to enjoy at the end of the race, hopefully, will be something you'll remember. Today's session should last 40 or 50 minutes. We might get better, we might get quicker. We were 50 minutes last time, we'll see how we go in round 2. We have 5 speakers. We'll be joined shortly by Simon Louis from the Bureau, followed by Dan Gillies from AMSA, who worked through some of the safety aspects, Drew Jones from the RMS, before Dave Jordan, our race committee chair, talks us through some of the changes and the highlights to the sailing instructions, and then Tracy from the RYCT will finish up on the Welcome to Hobart. So we'll start off with Simon from the Bureau just to talk through what we can expect over the next few days. Thank you.
All right, thanks Commodore, and good morning everyone, and welcome. So today I'm going to talk through the products and services that the Bureau provide in respects to marine users and ocean racing. And then I'll touch on a few safety points about marine forecast terminology. And then I'll get stuck into the weather forecast. So, find the clicker. So the first thing that we always like to touch on is that we encourage everybody to carry out the 5 vital weather checks before they go out on the water. So we like to reinforce this message. Check the marine warnings, check the forecast and be aware that weather can change quickly. Be aware of the wind conditions, the wave conditions, and know what time the tides are. So the services that the Bureau provides are all available on our website. This is the front page, and you can see that most of the marine and ocean services that would be relevant for yacht racing and marine use are accessed by hitting this bottom button at the bottom left. If you're out on the water, we do provide forecasts via HF radio and VHF radio, and we also have, as of a couple of years ago, introduced a version of the website that's optimized for restricted bandwidth. So if you've got internet access out on your boat, but it's pretty slow internet speed, you can get the text-only forecasts. And also, as of this year, we're now providing weather charts in that format as well. So that light version of the website looks like this. So a lot less of that extra padding and stuff that slows things down. The forecasts and warnings that we provide include text format forecasts for coastal and local waters, as well as high seas forecasts. And we also provide the forecast in a graphical format through our Met-Eye interface. So we split our coastal waters forecasts up into a series of districts along the coast that cover from the coast itself to 60 nautical miles out from the coast. And these are issued twice per day and are updated, like we monitor them continuously and update them as conditions require. If we have coastal wind warnings out, those will be updated every 6 hours when they're current. So these are the relevant coastal waters areas for this race. Starting from Sydney, we have the Sydney closed waters forecast, the Sydney coastal waters forecast, then Illawarra, Bateman's waters, Eden waters. The Victorian Forecasting Centre will issue the East Gippsland coastal forecast, and then the Tasmanian Forecast Centre takes over for the east of Flinders Island, upper east coast, lower east coast, south east coast, And then there's a separate forecast for Storm Bay and for the Derwent Estuary, which can have quite different conditions, as you all know. An example of marine wind warning when they're out is this. So it just basically lists the wind strength category. So in this case, just strong winds, and then the list of those districts that applies to. And then you can get more detail from the Coastal Waters text forecast. We also have high seas forecasts that cover the open ocean away from the coasts. So those are split into 4 sectors for Australia. And of course, in this case, the southeastern zone is the relevant one. These are issued 2 times a day, up to 24 hours ahead, and updated every 6 hours. And finally, we've got the Metai graphical portal for viewing forecasts. So this is a place where you can go and look at the winds, the forecast winds and waves, and rainfall in a nice graphical format. So there's this. Okay, so moving on to forecast terminology. So this is just a safety note for just making sure everybody understands the way we describe waves and winds in our forecasts. So if we say in a coastal waters forecast that we're expecting north to northeasterly winds at say 15 to 20 knots, we are referring to the average winds that you would expect to experience. And when we talk about average winds, we're talking about the average over 10 minutes and at 10 metres above the ground level. So one really important thing to note is that whatever the average wind speed you expect to see, in a typical situation you would expect wind gusts at up to about 40% stronger than the average. So in this case, if we're forecasting 15 to 20 knot winds, you may see wind gusts up around 25 to 30 knots in a typical situation. When we talk about wind gusts, we're talking about the maximum 3-second wind speed, averaged over 3 seconds, as opposed to 10 minutes. And that's just a normal situation. If we're forecasting thunderstorms or squalls, you can get even higher wind gusts than that associated with those. The categories of winds that match the Beaufort wind scale are what we issue our warnings based on. So those are strong winds from 26 to 33 knots, gale force winds from 34 to 47. We call storm force winds anything from 48 to 63, and hurricane force winds are 64 knots or more. So one common misconception is that, or thing that people don't realise, is that if we have a warning out for storm force winds, those are stronger than gale force winds. So it's significant and dangerous conditions if we come to that. Again, also with these, remember that we'll tend to talk about the 10-minute average wind speed, and that you might run into significantly stronger gusts if for any given warning category. Hopefully none of these ones will apply in this year's race. Waves, we give wave heights in metres, of course, and when we talk about wave heights, we're talking about the significant wave height, which again is pretty much the average sort of size wave that you might expect to experience during a period. And with waves, you will get a maximum wave height that's sort of double the average wave height on average over a 24-hour period. So if we're forecasting 1 to 2 metre wave heights, chances are you'll run into 4 metre waves a few times within that window. Okay, and so let's get stuck into the weather for the race. And we'll just start with the mean sea level pressure chart at the moment, just to get a feel for what the significant synoptic features are. We've got a high pressure system here in the Western Tasman and this cold front approaching. That will track across Tasmania on Christmas Day, and then this high will sort of redevelop as that slides away to the south and be probably the main feature that's controlling conditions during the race. So as we look at the forecast charts for the next few days, just see how this develops. Here's this front crossing Tasmania on this evening, and then it's through Tasmania on Christmas morning, and then by Christmas evening this high pressure system here is sort of re-established, and we've got a fairly shallow but broad low pressure trough over western New South Wales, and this will also be a fairly significant feature for the race, as we'll see. For the morning of Boxing Day, around race start, we've got a high pressure ridge here still, and this trough is extending across the far south coast of New South Wales. And then by the evening of Boxing Day, that trough will start to weaken and sort of shift south and weaken further still by the evening of the 27th. And the high pressure ridge will sort of re-establish and become the predominant feature, and the northerly winds will start to freshen as this next cold front and trough approach from the west. So for race start, conditions look really good. We're looking at a fairly sunny day, a nice warm top of 29. Winds could be quite light in the morning, but it's really perfect conditions for a sea breeze. So at the race start, we'll probably see east to northeasterlies around 10 knots in the harbour, maybe 10 to 15 knots at race start outside the heads, but increasing fairly quickly to around 15 to 25 knots as that sea breeze picks up during the afternoon. So it could be a pretty quick start as the boats round the heads and get down the coast. Not much swell, seas are pretty slight, although they will start to increase, of course, as the winds pick up. And the high tide time on Boxing Day is 11:52 with a 1.95 metre high tide, so tide will be going out. The Sydney forecast, as I said, looks quite good, so it should be a great day out on the waters for the start of the race. Top of 29 and this northeasterly sea breeze kicking in. So by the evening of Boxing Day, we've basically, you can see this sea breeze along central parts of the coast, 15 to 25 knots. The darker orange is 20 to 25 knots, just off Ulladulla there. But here you can see the effect of that broad low pressure trough that's extending across the far south coast at that time. So that in the evening, you're looking at sort of lighter and a bit more confused winds around the south coast and in eastern Bass Strait at that stage of the race. By 11 p.m. Wednesday, pretty similar really. We've still got this sea breeze, or what was a sea breeze generated winds along the northern part of the coast. Lighter and confused offshore from the south coast and northerlies further south. However, as we saw, that broad trough does weaken. It is pretty shallow, and as that happens, we'll see the northerlies extending right along the race route. Nothing very strong here. It's generally still around 10 to 25 knots for the most part. This is the morning of the 27th. And one thing that you'll notice here that could happen is that we may see a land breeze off the south coast, and so that we might have, to start the 27th, some light westerlies inshore, with these stronger northerlies persisting further offshore. But you can see that pushing through Bass Strait. Mid-morning on the 27th, similar story. So the high out here is still controlling all of this and directing these northerly winds down the coast. You can see throughout this period, there's generally a 1 to 2 metre east to southeasterly swell, and that doesn't change much through the first few days of the race. And then the significant wave heights will just depend on where you are with respect to the sea breeze and the fresh northerlies. Similar story on the 27th in the evening, getting stronger still. We may have a strong wind warning further up the New South Wales coast by this stage, but still just fresh north to northeasterlies along most of the race route. And then on Friday in the morning, it starts to get a little bit tricky down around Tasmania. So basically these north to northeasterlies will persist along the New South Wales coast, through until everybody's well past there. But we do have a little weak trough pushing into the area down here by Friday morning. And you can see that's showing through as these sort of moderate westerlies pushing through Bass Strait. And there's also a little moderate southerly pushing up around the southern tip of Tasmania. So that could get into Storm Bay and up into the Derwent by the morning of the 28th. But the timing of that is still, obviously, it's a pretty weak trough, so that could shift. Anyone's guess at this stage. And just showing that in a little bit more detail, based on this model run, that south to southeasterly is pushing through there at that time, but fairly variable. And the northerly winds that had been prevailing have sort of backed off a fair bit with that trough moving into the area. The night of the 28th, still strong winds up here, fairly confused in Eastern Bass Strait and off the east coast of Tasmania, as that trough is still sort of sitting through the area here. So that may prove a little bit tricky. Looking into the really long range stuff, so this is the morning of the 29th, and I've shown 4 different models here just to give a feel for how consistent they are at the moment. They all do show the next front reaching the area around this time. Not particularly strong winds, although we are likely to have strong wind warnings around the southeast part of the Tasmanian coastal waters as this west to southwesterly pushes through there. And you can see the timing is pretty consistent between the models here. So European model in the top left, we've got the Australian model with the front out here in the top right. Sort of in the vicinity in the Japanese model, and this one's a bit of an outlier at this stage. And then the 30th, you can see by that stage there's a fair bit of divergence and still quite uncertain, so fairly different wind regimes in each of these different models by the 30th around eastern Tasmania. So we'll have to track that and keep an eye on it as we get closer. Lastly, I'll just quickly look at the forecast currents. We've got, as I discussed in the long-range briefing, an eddy just sitting off the south coast, far south coast of New South Wales at the moment. So expect not particularly strong currents between Sydney and Ulladulla, but then a 1.5 to 2.5 knot southerly current just off the south coast here. And then a much more mixed story around Eastern Bass Strait and the east coast of Tasmania. This is the forecast for the 27th. You can see there's a couple of eddies in here, another one down here, and whether you're in a southerly or a northerly, it's going to be very dependent on where those end up. So that will be something to monitor. So yeah, in summary, a really nice start to the race. Things should start off pretty quickly with that sea breeze as we travel down the New South Wales coast. There's no real signs of any extreme conditions in this event, as you can see there. And yeah, thanks everybody, and good luck with the racing.
Thanks, Simon, for that forecast. Yeah, pleasant start, but we'll see how it unpacks over the next few days. Dan Gillies is joining us now from AMSA, just to walk through some of the safety procedures and issues that will be out there over the course of the race. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for your time. I've got a short amount of time this morning to go over search and rescue and safety considerations with you for the Sydney to Hobart Yacht race this year. Many of you will have already experienced a brief similar to this in the past. Hopefully this will just be a refresher for you so that these considerations are fresh in your mind if you should need them in an emergency. So what I'll go over briefly is just the beacon system, the 2 types of beacons that you'll be carrying aboard your yachts, being EPIRBs and PLBs. What will happen if you activate one? Some of the assets that we may task in response to a distress situation, and also some medical considerations. So just briefly a quick overview of the beacon detection system. There are a number of satellites in different constellations which are capable of detecting emergency beacons. Essentially, you aboard your yacht, if you activate a beacon, that will be detected by several of those satellites, and that message will then be relayed to a ground station, which will then be forwarded to the JRCC, the Joint Rescue Coordination Centre, where I work in Canberra. Your beacons will all be correctly registered, so we will receive the hexadecimal ID of your beacon, and using that we will be able to interrogate our database to find out which vessel that beacon is associated with, and if it's a PLB, who in particular it is associated with. Once we've done that, we'll also contact race control and we'll instigate a search and rescue response. So if you do have to activate a beacon, some tips. It needs to be attached either to you or the life raft or your vessel. They all have a lanyard fitted to them. Please make sure that it's attached to yourself or your life raft, and that somebody is appointed to watch that beacon and ensure that it remains attached. If it's rough and you're in a life raft or on board your vessel, you can retrieve the beacon so that you don't risk the lanyard breaking. However, they are designed to work best if they're deployed in the water. So the radio signal propagates best with water around it. So in reasonable conditions such as this photograph, deploy the beacon in the water and activate it. Some of them are manually activated, some of them are automatically activated once they're removed from their bracket and become wet. I would not trust that a beacon is active unless I'd armed and activated it myself. So if you do need to activate your beacon, even if it's an automatically activated one, it will still have a switch on the top of it. Turn it on. If you are using a PLB, make sure it's attached to you in an area that's above the water. The aerial must be vertical. They all have an aerial. Many of them are wrapped around the PLB or stowed away. You just need to pull the aerial out and deploy it so that it's vertical. That will give the satellites the best chance of giving us an accurate position. And obviously ensure that it is attached to you by lanyard or by being affixed to your PFD. So if you activate your beacon, whether it be an EPIRB or a PLB, the beacon will emit an audible tone so that you know it's active, and it will also have a flashing light that will either be a strobe on your EPIRB or it might be on a small PLB, it'll be an LED. If it is not flashing or beeping, activate another beacon. Once you've activated that beacon, that distress message will go via satellite back to the Joint Rescue Coordination Centre in Canberra. We'll check the registration details using its hex ID. We'll liaise with police and with race officials to coordinate a search and rescue response. Some of the assets that we may task to you, on the top left-hand side you can see fixed-wing aircraft. That is a Challenger jet aircraft, which is a dedicated search and rescue airplane. There are three of them, three bases for those in Australia, I should say. The nearest one to your route will be in Essendon, Melbourne. It's a very short transit to any point along the race route from Essendon for that aircraft. It's a drop-capable aircraft. It can drop to light stores containers, in which we can put anything. We can put communications equipment, medical stores, several other items. It can also drop large store containers that include dewatering pumps if those are required, additional life rafts, any other equipment. Some of the rotary assets that we may task, this is the Hobart-based police rescue helicopter. It's a BK-117. There's also a BK-117 based on the south coast at Moruya, which is a Westpac rescue helicopter. And then there's air ambulance helicopters in New South Wales and in Victoria, which may be tasked, which are these Augusta 139s, which are very large and very capable helicopters. But the compromise with that is that they emit a significant amount of downwash from their rotors. Just be aware that if any helicopter is tasked to your location, it will be extremely loud and extremely windy. You need to be prepared for that. Additionally, none of these helicopters are auto-hover capable, which means that they will not winch people from the water at night time. So if you have an emergency at night time and require extraction, that will be by vessel most likely, unless we get assistance from the military with some of their helicopters from Nowra. We'll come back to that point in a minute. Some of the vessels, your own vessels, may be required to provide assistance for search and rescue in the case of grave and imminent danger, being that there are many of you out there along the race route. The police vessel Nemesis, which is based here in Sydney, will be patrolling the south coast of New South Wales, coinciding with the race route, and may be tasked to provide assistance to you if required. There are smaller police vessels all the way down to Eden, and then in Victoria and Tasmania as well. And volunteer marine rescue assets are located along the route, but are limited to shorter distances offshore. And if you take that offshore route, which it seems likely many will, you're probably going to be outside of the range for these guys to respond. There may be significant delay in getting a larger coastal asset to respond to you as well, which is where these merchant vessels come in. We may divert merchant vessels to respond to you if you declare a distress situation. Please be aware that if a merchant vessel is diverted to you, it would be for the purpose of evacuating you from your vessel. They are extremely large and they will cause significant damage to your vessel if they come alongside. So they won't do that to provide any assistance in the form of repair. It will only be to save lives and to rescue you from that vessel or from a life raft or from the water. Manoeuvring those vessels, particularly in strong winds, is extremely difficult, especially if we divert something like a car carrier, which has a large amount of leeway. and it won't be able to safely close within your vessel or even provide a lee. Self-help. Coming back to the point about helicopters not being able to winch at night time, you do need to be prepared to survive until we can get assistance to you. If you activate the beacon, best thing you can then do is advise us by another means, your location, the nature of your distress, and the nature of assistance that you require. We will respond to every EPIRB or PLB detection as though it is grave and imminent danger or distress situation, but there may be additional information that you can get to us that will assist us in providing the right kind of help to you. Stay on board your yacht or life raft until otherwise directed. That is critical, particularly once you get further south and the water becomes colder. If your yacht is taking water, I would suggest you stay on it as long as physically possible. If you are in a life raft and a helicopter is overhead and lowering a crewman to you, do not exit the life raft until you are directed by the crewman at the life raft. Don't jump in the water. Assign somebody to take responsibility of the EPIRB always. The last thing you want is for you and your EPIRB to become separated, because the aircraft can't home you, they can only home the beacon. Keep any emergency beacon on until you are directed to turn it off by somebody in person. Just because there's an aircraft overhead, do not assume that they have seen you, and do not assume that they can remain overhead until you can be rescued. You leave the beacon on until somebody is with you and until that person directs you to turn the beacon off. Use visual signs to attract attention. Again, don't assume that you've been sighted by an aircraft just because it's flown over the top of you. Do everything you can to raise their attention. And use multiple beacons. If you have a genuine emergency, our advice is to activate 2 beacons. One beacon can easily become inadvertently activated, but it's very unlikely for 2 to become activated accidentally at the same time. So where we receive 2 beacons from the same vessel at the same time, we will automatically start tasking assets because we'll be very confident that that is a genuine distress situation. I would not recommend activating more than 2 or 3 beacons because it will interfere with the aircraft's ability to home and with the satellite's ability to give us good position location for those beacons if they're too close together. So if you activate 2 or 3 of them, if you're in a group, particularly if you're in the water, you should all have your own PLBs with you. If you become separated from that group, then activate your own beacon additionally. Helicopter transfers. As I said, helicopters will be very noisy and very windy. You'll all have VHF channel 16 turned on for the duration of the race, but if you are expecting search and rescue assets to attend your location, please turn your VHF radio up as loud as possible because they will give you instructions as to how to manoeuvre your vessel or where you need to be, and you need to be able to hear those instructions. They'll come on VHF 16. Follow those directions from either the helicopter or from the fixed-wing rescue aircraft, which will probably arrive on scene before the helicopter. Stow all loose equipment and remove all flap and secure all sails. Helicopters are very, very unlikely to try and winch anybody from any of your yachts because of the danger of entanglement in rigging. So if we do have to winch somebody, it's most likely that they'll request you put them in a life raft. Be prepared for extremely strong winds, noise and spray from the helicopters. And if it's possible to manoeuvre, you can do that. You'll get instructions from the aircraft as to how they would like you to manoeuvre to make winching operations most easy for them. Turn your radars onto standby and please don't use HF communications while aircraft are overhead. They'll be talking to you on VHF channel 16. And be ready to launch a life raft, as that's where any casualties may be winched from. So medical assistance. So the race committee has doctors on standby for you. We also have a doctor at JRCC on our telemedical advice service if you require that because you can't reach the race committee or for whatever other reason. If you have a serious injury illness, the race committee will contact JRCC and they'll advise if you have a patient that requires evacuation or if you require additional medical stores to stabilise that person. If it's serious, life-threatening and a genuine emergency, you could also contact us directly or contact 000. Lastly, for the return voyage, please update your EPIRB and boat contact details. Many of you will have separate crews for the return voyage. If you could please keep track of how many crew there are on board the vessel on the return voyage, their intended departure times, arrival dates, routes, etc. If we receive a beacon detection from the vessel on a return voyage, we'll respond in exactly the same way as if we get one during the race, except often we don't have as much information available to us which might assist us in responding. So if you could try to keep good track of your return voyage plans, that would be greatly appreciated. That's it for me. Thank you for your time, and wish you all the best of luck and a safe voyage to Hobart. Cheers.
Thanks, Dan. It's great to see the assets and preparedness that we've got overseeing the fleet. As we mentioned a while ago, so I mentioned it's going to be a very idyllic day on Sydney Harbour for Boxing Day, and it's going to be very, very busy. So obviously the safety of the start is very important. To talk to us about that is Drew Jones from the RMS. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Just a couple of quick slides. As you know, there's an exclusion zone out there for the race. It hasn't changed much in the last few years. We have actually given you a bit more room down the southern end of the exclusion zone. You can see that line across the southern boundary actually goes pretty much due east-west. So that bottom corner on the southwestern side, there's a bit of extra room there for manoeuvring and keeping you guys inside, out of the spectators. Also up on the corner near South Head, you can see the line as it goes up towards the peak there north of South Head. We've shaved off a bit of space there, given the competitors more space. So you've got a bit more room between the X-ray rounding mark and the exclusion zone line. With the exclusion zone, the timings basically is at 11:30. We have a 6 knots no wash comes in restriction for the whole area that's in that map. So basically from Middle Head across to North Head, right down to Garden Island and all waters in between, and all that orange area out to sea you can see as well. So any of your support boats and everything outside the competitors area, please let them know it's 6 knots, no wash. And if any support boats inside can also keep to that, it helps us on the outside as well. Once you're inside the exclusion zone, which becomes active at midday, please do not go outside the exclusion zone area, the race area, into the spectator areas. If you're crossing that line into the spectators at 90 degrees to go and hoist sails or something like that, it causes unnecessary crossing situations, and you've got spectators out there that are not necessarily looking for competitors, they're looking out for other spectators. So please, once you're in, stay in, and the only way we want you to go out is through the Tasman Sea, and turn right, please. Other than that, that's about it. Thanks, guys. Have a great run.
Thanks, Drew. And just a quick point as well, for those of you with tenders or support vessels, the exclusion zone applies to them as well. So there's no exemptions to come in alongside once that zone comes into operation. David Jordan has taken over this year as our race committee chair and has very ably navigated us thus far. He's now going to talk us through the sailing instructions and some changes. Thank you.
Thanks, Commodore. I note it is a briefing. I shall attempt to be brief. I'd firstly like to highlight some operational matters before addressing the sailing instructions more specifically. I draw your attention to Marine and Safety Tasmania's Notice M195 of 18 regarding the deployment of scientific equipment in the form of a wave and weather buoy in Storm Bay, approximately 1.5 miles east of Yellow Bluff off North Bruny Island. Following from Dan's comment in respect of us having 2 doctors on call at Hobart Race Control, I'd additionally note that when rescue services are rendering assistance to you, they may use their own medical arrangements. Irrespective of the assistance being provided, please ensure you have a good framework for reporting medical emergencies. A medical reporting aid memoir is in your nav bags and may prove useful. I'd remind you of your obligations to ensure man overboard procedures, man overboard recovery procedures at least, are well considered and practiced. Similarly, your alternative steering arrangements. Please also give consideration for towing. Unconscious tows can be a difficult evolution, particularly with securing the tow and managing any induced yawing. Remember, with tows, the towing vessel is taking you to the nearest safe haven as they have determined. Probably not a good time to be asking them to head to a destination of your choice, to drop off crew and then proceed elsewhere to pick up much desired victuals. To the sailing instructions specifically, happy if you wish to follow through with me. Clause 11.4 in relation to fuel, I just remind those boats with fuel containers, please, you're not to use these as movable ballast. Still at 11.4, in respect of satellite phones, they need to be on for the duration of the race. And further at 11.4 with AIS, it needs to be switched on also. As an aside, commercial fishing vessels are increasingly using AIS on their nets and lines. There's usually a strong cluster of AIS at such points. The 100-metre contour off Eden is a good example. 18.1 in the exclusion zone, as mentioned previously in Sydney Harbour, we should have provided, or we have provided, more clarity in respect of them not being marks of the course and treating it as an obstruction. 20.1, alternative penalties. Before 33.53 south, which has given us more sea room to exonerate if we need to. And 20.2 with alternative penalties after 33.53 south. Staying with clause 20 and elsewhere in the SIs in relation to penalties, please note the emphasis on may, not shall, for the race committee, and a reduction in some of the penalty parameters. Skipping to 33, media rights and restrictions. Comanche and InfoTrack will be live streaming throughout the Rolex Sydney to Hobart yacht race. Other yachts are not permitted to live stream, including to your own websites. I draw your attention in that respect to notice of race 15 as well. Continuing with the SIs at 33.6 for additional persons. To facilitate the requirements of the organising authority on this occasion, persons will be disembarking at sea from Wild Oats 10, Wild Oats 11 and Comanche. At 35.2, a reminder that drones are not permitted for use by any boat. I'll take the opportunity to emphasise that in context of the racing rules of sailing, clause 51, and its reference to movable ballast, sail stacking is not permitted. On behalf of David Kellett, some communications matters. 37.4, VHF radios and the requirement to maintain a continuous listening watch on VHF 16. I'd like us to gain a little bit more confidence with our VHF regime, especially as we get maturing networks along the New South Wales coast, courtesy of Marine Rescue New South Wales, and similarly along the Tasmanian coast. At 38.1, in respect of SCEDs, please note the 3 HF SCED times with 6 meg in the evening and 4 meg at midnight and in the morning. If you do retire at 38.3, please keep in communication and participate in SCEDs until you are in port. At 38.4, there's no HF requirement after you've made your Tasman Island call. Just want to expand on 39 and the communications check by sat phone, which will conduct at 12:05 each day and in accordance with Amendment 1 to the sailing instructions, conclude at 12:20. The intent of this activity is to increase confidence in our sat phone regime to allow us to broaden our communications options. A selection of boats in the fleet will be called at random. It's a race committee instigated call, and therefore the onus is on me, a committee, to follow up with those boats that were called and ensure closure for you of any such missed calls. Clause 41, Green Cape report. Do please make sure you get acknowledgement from either JBW or Hobart Race Control. And 44, for retirements, of note, we do have a team in Eden who will be available as liaison for you should you end up there. One note on communications, I would ask you to look to formally close out events or calls such as broadcasting cancellation of a pan once your circumstance has stabilised. I encourage you to have a formal passage plan in place for your return voyage. The log-on function at the Marine Rescue New South Wales website is an example of the sort of framework that will help us all. Some postscripts. There has been a request for clarification, interpretation in respect of reaching struts. This has been forwarded to and has been examined by the international jury. We're expecting response shortly and that will be posted on receipt. A theme from the equipment audits in respect of lifelines, I'd ask you please to ensure that you do tighten your lifelines appropriately, whether you've been conducting maintenance or otherwise. Please do ensure they are tightened appropriately. Some parish notices, some outstanding paperwork from URM, Duende, Gunrunner, Enterprise and Hollywood Boulevard. We're still doing some spot checks outstanding on Arcadia and Showtime. That might nearly be complete. Some incomplete spots in respect of Allegro. Triton and Voodoo, we have one as sign-in. I understand there may be a member interstate. If you could confirm with the sailing office, please, that would be appreciated. And Scallywag for your Skyplate collection. For those boats mentioned, please do report to the sailing office and receive affirmative closure of the respective task. I'd like to thank the sailing office, led by Sailing Manager Justine Kirkchen, for their outstanding efforts in getting us prepared for the 74th edition of the Rolex Sydney to Hobart Yacht Race. I'd also like to thank Australian Sailing, the Cruising Yacht Club of Australia and our finishing partner, the Royal Yacht Club of Tasmania, for their excellent support provided to me personally and more broadly to the race committee. In closing, I'd particularly like to thank you for not just your participation, but importantly, your contribution in getting us this far. It's a big commitment. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions from the floor. There being no questions, thank you, Commodore. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for a very thorough briefing. Our final speaker this morning is Tracy Matthews, the Commodore of the RYCT, who will talk to us about the welcome that awaits us at Constitution Dock. Tracy.
Good morning. As Commodore of the Royal Yacht Club of Tasmania, I'm absolutely delighted to be here today, and the Royal Yacht Club are pleased once again to be the finishing partner alongside the Cruising Yacht Club of Australia and Rolex for the 74th edition of the Sydney to Hobart Yacht Race. Just a couple of things for you to note this year as you get to the Hobart end of the race. Firstly, as you round the Iron Pot, enter the Derwent River and make your way towards Hobart, you'll notice on your starboard side the Ocean Monarch oil rig. This is moored between Jellybrand Point and Tranmere in Ralphs Bay. You won't miss it. It's enormous and lit up like a Christmas tree at night. Apparently, it's the largest solid structure currently in Tasmania. Most importantly, there is a 500-metre enforced exclusion zone around the rig, so if you do find yourself over in that direction, please be aware of this and stay clear. As per your sailing instructions, the finish line is off the Castray finish box. For those who have not been to Hobart before, this is what it looks like. Positioned between the white Empress Towers on the left and the cream CSIRO building on the right. The outer end of the line will be marked with a yellow Rolex buoy and will have a flashing light at night. The inner distance mark, if used, is also yellow and must be left to port. If you are finishing at night, please illuminate your sail number on the port side so the finish box can confirm your identity. Once through the finish line, please drop all sails and stand by for the escort vessel. This will be one of the RYCT patrol boats. If there are several yachts finishing together, please be patient. A patrol boat will get to you as soon as possible. Please observe all directions from the skipper of the patrol boat. During the opening hours of the Taste of Tasmania, you will have the fun of motoring past Princess Wharf, where you will receive a traditional Hobart welcome and congratulations from those enjoying the taste. The berthing arrangements in Kings Pier Marina and Constitution Dock are an intricate affair to make sure that everyone fits. You have been allocated a berth and will be directed to this berth by the patrol boat. You must use the assigned berth. Don't forget, you must also carry fenders for berthing, and these must be available on your arrival. Please don't send them down with your luggage. For those in Constitution Dock, you'll be directed to stand by while the bridge is raised, and this year in Con Dock, you'll be berthed alongside. The tracker on your yacht will be removed in Hobart. The volunteer who delivers that all-important carton of beer will cut the cable tie and collect the tracker. The liaison centre, as per usual, will be in the Rolex Village, and our volunteers will be there to help you with any queries, questions, directions and declarations. Very importantly, there's been a change this year to the collection point for your baggage. Baggage can be collected from Macquarie Wharf number 2 in Hunter Street. This is also known as the cruise terminal. This is a very short walk from the Rolex Village, and the liaison centre can provide directions if needed. Volunteers from the Glenorchy Rotary Club will be staffing the baggage collection area 24 hours daily after the first yacht arrives and up to 24 hours after the last yacht arrives. The official prize giving will again be in the Federation Concert Hall at the Hotel Grand Chancellor, 3 p.m. on the 31st of December. It's a great way to start the New Year's celebrations. I also encourage everyone to come down to the Murrayville Esplanade in Sandy Bay to visit the Royal Yacht Club of Tasmania. It's a short drive or leisurely walk from the waterfront and is also the location of the committee room, radio room and protest room during the race. The club will be open normal hours and welcomes friends, family and crews to enjoy our bar and dining hospitality or to access services. The depth of water at the fuel jetty is approximately 3.5 metres and the slipping capacity is around 18 tonnes. Please call us at the club if there's anything that we can help you with. Finally, I wish you all a safe trip to Hobart and a happy Christmas. Have a great race and I'll see you down there. Cheers.
Thank you, Tracy. That brings to an end our race briefing for today. Just a couple of points. All of you have now been issued with cards for your crew to let them in and out of the club. Could you make sure your crews carry those around? It makes it easy for our security people. A change to the live start broadcast this year. We're on 7 Mate with a simulcast on Channel 7. Peter Shipway and James Spittle will be doing the commentary this year. So friends and family, it's on 7 Mate, and we'll cross over about 5 minutes before the start to be on both channels. Just leaves it now for me to wish you all the very best of luck for a safe and hopefully fast journey down to Hobart. I will endeavour to meet each of you as you arrive. If you could help me by arriving before 10 or after 6 in the morning, it'd be very helpful so I get some sleep. But genuinely, please do have a safe race, have a fast race, and thank you once again for entering the 74th edition of the Rolex Sydney Hobart. Best of luck. Thank you.